Good evening, folks, or good afternoon, good morning. We're going in reverse this time, wherever you are tuning in from around the world. And welcome to a special presentation on SUP Racer and Stand Up Magazine. SUP for debate. What is the future of our sport? Is it a flat water sport? Is it a surf ocean sport? We're going to have a bit of a philosophical discussion today. Mike's got a lot of opinions on this, so do I, and I think so do you guys.
Yeah.
So we want you to leave some comments while this live stream's going, and we're just going to ramble on for 20 minutes and perhaps not solve anything, but just throw the question out there and just maybe give you guys something to think about and something to debate. So, Mike, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to chat with you, mate. And the future of paddling. We've seen some big events recently and some big news just a few hours ago in regards to both surf racing and flat water racing at a world championship level. What's your take on this, mate?
Regarding the news, well, we knew it was rumored that the ICF was going to go to Thailand, but nothing was confirmed. So the newsletter came through last night. I was just about to go to bed, and it wasn't like crazy surprised, but it'll be interesting to see in terms of location because it's not in Europe. So we'll see how that's going to turn out. But other than that, I welcome it. I think we're going to have some more questions answered regarding that over the coming month with port transports and traveling there and so forth. But we have a whole year, so no, I think. And I looked it up on Google Maps. I've never been there, and it looks like a tip-top venue.
It's definitely going to be flat water, that's for sure. There might be some bumps in the long distance race, but it's not going to be a surf race. Yeah. Which contrasts, of course, with the ISA surf race that we just saw in Puerto Rico, which we talked about last week and which was pretty cool. So it's kind of, they're framing it for us, really. As much as we don't want to get into the politics of it all, it is a good frame and a foundation to launch this debate. And we can go back, way before the World Championships even existed. The original event in this sport was the Battle of the Paddle, of course, the famous surf race. This race started as a surf racing sport, essentially. And we've seen the gravitation away from that towards the mass start races on the inland lakes and rivers, the Glah-Glahs, the Chatterjacks of the world, which are much more accessible, but some would argue they're less exciting. And I feel like this almost gets to a philosophical level. Do we want to, the pinnacle of this, because we can have both, obviously. You can have surf racing and flat water. But do we want the pinnacle of our sport to be flat water, or do we want the pinnacle to be surf racing? Do we want the pinnacle to be this exciting Formula One style sport, or do we want it to be this mass participation sport? Are we Formula One or the Boston Marathon? So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to frame this debate. And what's your position? What side would you take?
Well, and that's where I am so torn in this, because the more I'm flipping each side over, they all have very, very legit arguments. And of course, yes, like just from my perspective, I entered the sport purely as a surfer with my enthusiasm for surfing. So, and I saw the development of the sport and how the industry sold this as a surfing for everyone. So it was successful and accessible to people in landlocked places. And they developed, and it started to develop its own kind of dynamic over there. And sadly, while that aspect was growing, the other one was dying off. We lost the Battle of the Paddle, being taken over by the PPG. We lost that, and then the pandemic kind of also helped killing off channel races. Maui was no longer the epicenter of SUP. Downwind racing became irrelevant, and now we are looking at this. And of course, I always frowned upon this really hard. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Like we've all been there. It was the heyday. And I dearly miss these days. And I was always kind of the person who's like, the canoe, I got nothing to do with canoe. That's not who I am. I am not part of that. That's not the lifestyle. But, I got invited to go to the ICF World Championships in Balaton a year and a half ago. And wow, I was really impressed on, number one, how exciting flat water racing can be, and number two, how this is most likely the future of the sport. And you see in this picture very like a vast contrast between the two, where you hear there is nothing is left to chance there. There were, I want to say, 8 races or something, and there were 12 people attending to these 8 races, 3 flaggers, 1 referee, and the volunteers holding the board. So nothing is left to chances. So, and that's kind of like how I went into into my new kind of philosophy with it, until we've seen surf racing, and that kind of brought everything kind of back up, all those memories. We had all these old school paddlers there, and it was like, oh yeah, well, hang on a second, that's actually how it was, you know? So we have this push and pull between those two, and so it really made me think a lot and hard, where is this thing gonna go? And then yes, of course, does it need to go somewhere, or it could just coexist, but evidently, at some point, there's going to have to be a unified kind of structured kind of sport. You know,
well, is there? Could we end up with parallel sports? I mean, look at I talk about cross country skiing a lot. There's very different disciplines in cross country skiing. They even have different techniques, like classic and freestyle, like you have in swimming. So they haven't gone towards a single type of racing and a single even technique of how you actually do the sport. You can look at swimming, for example. You know, there's 4 different techniques. There's every different range from the 50-meter sprints to the 20K ocean swims. And you could argue that if you're a fan, you know, some people find the ocean racing in the Olympics way more exciting than the 50-meter sprints. And it could be the same in SUP. The problem is, of course, and I don't think we should be focused on the Olympics, but say hypothetically the federations, well, they're trying to drive towards the Olympics in some form. We're only going to have 1 race there, okay? There's going to be 1 marquee SUP race if we ever get to that pinnacle. And it's going to be probably a tech race, you know, a beach race, a surf race on the ISA side, or a flat water course race on the ICF side. So we're not going to have the luxury of a cross-country skiing or a swimming where we can showcase the whole broad range of our sport. For the vast majority that ever see stand-up paddling in the future, we're just going to be one thing. And is that one thing going to be flat water or surf race? Like, do we want that aspirational excitement, or do we want something that's you can do anywhere and that anyone can do?
You bring up, this is a really cool point, and I never really thought about that. Yes, of course, that would be the best if we could have SUP, you're an ocean surf person, champion, and you can have it all. But let's just for fun do this thought experiment that we would have an inclusion in this. Like, okay, you know what, guys? Let's do a tech race with the surfing in Huntington Beach in 2028. That's something that. So, can everybody come there, or do we have to qualify? Is it kind of going to be like a WSL situation where you're like the surfing champion of Switzerland still can't go because he's nowhere near the world champions in surfing altogether? So will there be enough slots for everybody or not? So if A, then we'll have probably our surf race specialists that qualify and get to go there, and we'll see a lot of landlocked European people very frustrated that the Olympics is being taken into an environment that is not suiting them, that they don't have a chance to catch up to the likes like Connor or Candice or whoever is prevailing then, like Shrimpy. He'll be like 26 or something like that by then. Or are they going to say, well, you know, we're going to open up this for everybody. Everybody sent their best female and best male paddler, and we're going to hold it in some inland bay or in an inlet in a harbor.
It's
and
a very good.
You will have a lot of happy people.
It's a very good question, because I know we were talking about off air about this, that I think it was the Germans or one of the countries in Europe, when they went to the event in Poland, they weren't happy with the distance race because it was advertised as a flat water race, and it ended up being this wild ocean race. And the same thing could happen in Pattaya. Pattaya gets very windy. And we've seen the same at the ISA. I remember a few years ago in Fiji, there was uproar because the surf race was moved from, it was advertised as a flat water race in a harbor, and it ended up being held at Cloudbreak, one of like the gnarliest surf breaks in the world. So there is history here where athletes, you know, train all year for something, and then they get a totally different race. And if we ever were hypothetically getting the Olympics, or just, you know, put this on anything, a world championship, you know, a pro tour, anything at the top of the sport, what are we training for? I mean, you could end up selecting athletes for the Olympics at a qualifying event in the surf, and you get to the Olympics and there's no waves, or vice versa. You could be sending all these hardcore gun Eastern European, like stand-up canoeists, and then they get to the Olympics, it's in the waves. They got no idea what they're doing, but they kicked everyone's ass in the flat water trials. So it's very interesting how I feel like we haven't even got our shit together as a sport, and we've seen that at the Worlds, both ISA and ICF, where we know what our formats are and our conditions are going to be. I mean, the Olympics would almost be that's a Pandora's box. I don't know if we want to go there. But.
So there you have it. There you have it. And when you have all these variables, and variables are hard for awesome. You have variables like here, a huge variable. You have this wave. There is all of a sudden your controllable environment probably shrunk by 50%, if not more, if you're dealing with a wave like this. And number one, it makes it a liability for organizers. Safety can be an issue. So I'd say it is probably a favorable idea to take away those variables that you can't really deal with, and in terms of risk management. So if you have, maybe very boring lane racing, but you don't have to deal with safety and carnage and all of this kind of stuff. And I'd say the organizers have one headache less, and the athlete has one headache less, because all they know, we need to go 100 meters in a straight line. Instead of this, which of course is very exciting to watch, but people are falling, boards are breaking, you can get injured, it's just madness, Of course, we'll love watching pictures like this, but there's no way we can hold, I'd say there's no way we can hold an Olympics, or let alone any kind of, mass participation, every country involved, kind of
we
championships
hold the Olympics there.
with its freaking overhead waves.
LA 2028, I think the surfing is going to be at Lower Trestles, I'm pretty sure, which is just around the corner from
probably.
The spiritual home of SUP racing, Doheny and then Salt Creek, we were watching. So if they were to host, I think I saw Kristen in the comments was talking about the ISA submitting surf racing for consideration for the 2028 Olympics. I think at the very least they're going to try and do some sort of exhibition there during the surf contest. So we're going to see a SUP race at the 2028 Olympics, whether it's officially on the program or not.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a surf race if they, if the ISA's history is anything to go by. And it'll be held at the same location as the surfing venue, of course, because that's where their whole setup is. And it'll be in the waves of Southern California. And then that's going to be at the world's introduction to SUP racing is going to be, it's a surf race. So does that, is the decision out of our hands? I mean, obviously we're not even trying to decide here, but if that's where it goes, what's it mean for the rest of the sport? Because the pinnacle race will be a surf race, whereas that's basically the only surf race in the world. There's 5 surf races left around the world, and most of them aren't that big. Are we going to have a disconnection in our sport where all the athletes that are winning Gla and the flat water races can't actually go to the top of the sport because it's just being dominated by Hawaiians and Australians?
I think there's going to be a huge disconnect, as sorry as I am, which the people are going to say, and that's what was told to me, the kids that are growing up with this, they're growing, the majority of them is in flat waters. The people are training for this. The people that buy boards, that holds this industry afloat, is not the surf racing players pro. It's the flat water people that holding this industry afloat. And if you are alienating with a surf race the majority of the people that are actually want to participate in something like this, but are scratching their heads when they have to go through head-high white water, then I don't think you're doing the market in itself a favor. So yes, surf racing is cool. Awesome pictures.
Yes.
So you know what I mean?
I think
that's the problem.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see in the next 10 years. Let's presume a healthy future for stand-up paddling in general, and that the sport continues to grow and participation grows, and we have this luxury debate to have. I think you're right. There's going to be a disconnect. It's going to be almost 2 parallel sports. There'll be flat water racing and there'll be surf racing, and they'll be considered the champions of both. I mean, there already are, right? We see it at the Worlds and whatnot, but I think it'll be 2 very separate sports. You'll be a paddler, a surf paddler, or a regular paddler. And we'll see the ICF continue trying to push their agenda. going flat water every year, and we'll see the rise of the canoe nations, the Germanys, and looking into the Eastern Europe countries that are very strong there. They'll come up and they'll start kicking us, but they'll never be competitive, or there'll be outliers. There might be, but generally speaking, they'll never be as competitive as the the Hawaiis and the Australians, because we grow up in the surf. It's such a difficult thing to master. You can be the best, fastest, strongest paddler in 200 meters, in 5Ks, in 10Ks on flat water. You go in the waves and you didn't grow up in the waves, you're going to get your ass kicked every single time.
Very, very tactical. Very, very tactical.
So are we going to see the future where there's a European sport and an Hawaiian, Australian, Californian sport?
Well, the question is, and that's just my spontaneous thought right now, with the disappearance of SUP in Hawaii and California altogether, will there be even people that are mastering these kind of techniques? Because who's racing through waves in California? Or do you see people on 12.6s or 14-foot boards just for fun going in and out the waves somewhere at Doheny? Probably not. They're all foiling. So the people that are actually know how to do this, they're gonna there's not a whole lot of left of those.
That's it. I mean,
that
brings up the existential question almost of, if we got into the Olympics, say, and it was a surf race, because the powers that be deemed that was the most exciting, and that's a whole nother debate. I don't think it necessarily is. Who would be doing it? Do you remember when kite surfing got into the Olympics temporarily, and then it was kicked out straight away? And it was whatever format it was the format that nobody practices. Like it made no sense for kite surfing to be in under that format. So are we going to see stand-up paddling in, where it's a discipline that almost nobody actually does and practices, and you never see it during the year? So we've got this sport of stand-up paddle racing that's known as a flat water sport around the world, and then we go to the Olympics and do this exotic version that even many top athletes can't do. It could be it could be an interesting situation. I don't know what the answer is or what's best. I'm not saying either way is better or worse here. We just wanted to throw the question out there for a debate. This is SUP for debate, 20-minute happy hour.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Where do you see it going? And do you think, let's bring it back a step, do you even think that's the most exciting? Because I hear a lot of talk when we talk with the ISA in the years gone by. It's like, the only way this will get in the Olympics is if it's a short, sharp surf race, BOP style. That's what is going to look good on TV, and that's what people will watch. But there are a lot of things people watch, if that even is the goal. That's another question. There's a lot of things that people watch and get ratings that are very much the antithesis of surf racing. You look at Formula One versus cycling. We had this discussion the other day, Mike. Formula One is, it's fast, it's action-packed, there's crashes, it's exciting, it's pretty short. That's one of the most watched sports in the world. One of the other most watched sports in the world, or events, is the Tour de France. It's the complete opposite. It's 3 weeks of very boring, flat cycling most of the time. They get no problem getting, sponsorship money and ratings on TV at the Tour de France. So why does stand-up paddling have to follow the Formula One path and try and be exciting? Why can't we create these longer events and tell these interesting stories? I mean, to me, I would rather watch 5 hours of the 11-city tour than 30 minutes of yet another elite race. To me, those longer races are exciting. I know maybe I'm in the minority, but if we found an interesting way to present those Tour de France style, why wouldn't that be the pinnacle of the sport? I'm not convinced that surf racing is the default setting for a wider audience.
No, I mean, like what you just said, we can have a whole other video about just that, the general philosophy. But I would say for me, what really was a key experience was the technical race on the Lake of Balaton, because it was kind of like we have to marry those two together. And I tell you, they had it was about 100-meter sprint race to the first buoy, which made the first buoy turn very exciting, because they were all as fast as they can sprinting to that buoy, and it was like a 40-degree left hand, 45-degree left hand turn, I want to say, and then it followed an M. And I'd say the whole tech race was 8 to 12 minutes, if I remember that correctly. And there were lead changes, and it was completely flat water. And there were lead changes, and then they came in. And to me, it was like, poof, that's it. I've never seen a flat water tech race where wow, there's actually something going on. And I think if those two can marry without having to have those waves, I really believe it. Or like you put in that Joker lab from Paul Jackson, you can
yes.
make this. or the super lap, you can make. I think there is a way to marry those together. It can be a 100-meter track and field sprint and a formula race at the same time. I think it's possible.
It's an interesting debate. I think the flat water tech races at the ICF, Poland and Hungary, were pretty cool. I like the fact that waves. I mean, we're just playing devil's advocate here. I don't think either of us have taken a position on this, but I look at both sides. And I see the waves are the great. You mentioned at the start here. It's that slightly random factor where there's a little bit of luck, and the lead changes can happen very suddenly. And if I compare it again to cross country skiing, the format of the type of cross country skiing that I love the most is the biathlon, where it's the skiing and the shooting. And that's because there are so many lead changes when they go into the shooting range and some guy misses, or, one of the women it goes from first to 10th or 10th to first. It's very exciting. And our version of that is the waves. We've seen so many times a paddler in 6 catches a wave and surfs to the front and wins the race. So it's tricky without the waves. How do you bring in that factor? Is it a super lap? Could we have something like that? I like the idea that it's something more than just who's the fastest. That's why I love this whole last paddler standing thing. It's not about, we just know who's going to win most races. All right, it's Boothie and T2 or whoever is going to be on the podium. When there's more random, not luck, but when there's more unknowns, when there's more variables, I think is the right word. When there are more variables in play, that's when it gets exciting. And I don't know if that's the format of the race itself, the amount of buoy turns, the start procedure, non-style start. Is it just the waves? I think they're interesting questions to ask, and we don't have the answers, nor do we have time because the time is running out. But what are your final thoughts on this? Your clock.
You can reset your clock right there. Well, we can go into the straight most variable sport that probably has become Olympic is surfing, open ocean surfing. I mean, if there's a variable we're talking about ever was, then it's in open ocean surfing. And actually there, the best surfer is not necessarily the winner. It's the best strategic paddler using priority and all of that. So there you have and then the surfing is basically just, is this person able to catch that variable that allows them to perform? And then you throw this back into Kelly Slater wave pool, and now all of a sudden surfing to me becomes very boring actually. But now he's the best surfer. But they have a 2-minute ride or however long. They break down the wave in different sections, and I know cut back, barrel, aerial, and the wave is over. And everybody does the same thing almost to the clock.
They plan their runs. It's become snowboarding in the wave pools. They know exactly what they're going to do on every stretch of the wave. And that's, for a traditional surfer like me, and for you, that's kind of boring. But with stand-up paddle racing, I think there's a lot of good comments coming through about Tommy saying it wasn't flat in Poland. Yeah, there was a lot of wind in Poland. It's a complex topic. I think Tio summed it up pretty good. Kristen's got some very good comments in there. James asked about downriver racing. Could there be any traction for a downriver slalom style race? That would actually be pretty cool. And I think I've always believed that downriver racing is the most underrated form of stand-up paddling, and we really should have had more pay at river
100%.
Games, GoPro river games, that kind of mountain games. They were amazing. That was some of the most exciting racing I ever watched. But I feel like that's even more niche than surf racing. I think, I don't know, tell me what you think on this, Mike, but I think the more we talk about this, the more I realize that the Olympics shouldn't be part of the question when we talk about this, because once we start talking about the Olympics, it's almost like we've got to decide. And it's clear just from talking about this with you now, we don't have any answers to this. And if we got into the Olympics, we'd have to have an answer. It would be set in stone that, okay, we're the pinnacle of surf racing. That's it. We've reached the end of history in stand-up paddling evolution. So I think if we took the Olympics out of the equation, it's still a blank canvas, and we can make the kind of sport that makes sense, that suits everybody and is fair and open to participation, but is also exciting. So I feel like once the Olympics is taken out of it, we've got a lot more flexibility here.
Well, I think at the end of the day, there will be forces that decide where it goes that are not in our control. The force will be who is going where and when, who is buying what and how much of it, where is the money going, and all of that. It is not going to be one person that is going to be deciding. It's kind of like, where is the herd gravitating towards, and what is going to create the biggest economic opportunity for our sport in order for people like you and me to live off of it, in order for people like support brands to support paddlers and so on. So this thing is also sustainable. And I think those mechanics will sort out themselves. And if you're going against the grain, then whatever you do will come to an end pretty quick. So that's where I would leave it. It's going to be where the masses are heading.
So I think that's a pretty good way to sum it up. We're running out of the timer for the second time, so let's leave it there before we go off on any more rabbit holes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us. It's always a pleasure, mate, and thank you for everyone that jumped on live, or if you're watching this in replay, you're welcome to still leave comments. We'll look through these later. But we'll be back next week for another chat about I'm not sure what. But if anyone's got a suggestion for the next one, let us know. And look at that. We cheated with the timer, but the second time we stuck to it. So we'll wrap it up right there, folks. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you again soon. We're out on the water. All right. I'm going to go for a little surf myself right now. It's a beautiful summer's day in Australia. Over and out, folks.